NorCal, 209 King of Comedy. It's Rick without the K. James presents, in my opinion, podcast.
Almost skipped out on this question, you guys, where it kind of aligns to what we were just talking about, is by having biracial relationships, do you think the parties gain or lose their identity, right? And I asked that because I look at like your relationship, right? Like I said,
My wife and I had the same conversation the night before you sent me those questions, just about
so
gaining and losing
but,
ethnic
but I
identity.
asked that because I look at like my relationship with my son's mother, right? We would have these conversations where she'd be like, "Oh, we're gonna go see my family for Christmas," and I'm Latino. Means we're not leaving till fucking after New Year's Day, right?
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean?
January 4th,
Where her
or
family,
Quattro, as you call it.
the whites, right? They got together and they literally got together for 2 hours, maybe.
Have pie and presents. That's all we do.
And it was quick. It was, and her whole family like consists of maybe 12 people. And we're talking about cousins, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, and that isn't even one of my,
one of
my
the
aunt and
segments.
uncle. Yeah. So when I take my kids around my family, I'm just like, there's such difference. And for you, it's got to be the same thing, right? Because right now I'm with a Filipina, right, woman, right, and her family gets together, and I'm only assuming your wife's family does the same thing, at least on that side, where like
100%.
they get together. And it's the pig out, right? The whole pig that's been roasted. They've got enough food to feed 80 people, but only 40 are
Well,
there.
because you need 80 people in our case. So I talked about how I only have 14 cousins or 15 cousins. So many are men and women.
So
my
do
wife
you
has
feel
56
like your kids-
first cousins. And I'd be lying if I said I knew all the names. I would say I know a slight majority of the names, but I can get by with like, bro, pretty lady, stuff like that, just the prefixes. Hey, pretty lady, great to see you again.
Well, at least with Latinos, somebody's name is Maria.
Yeah.
So you're
Right.
going to get it
With
right.
Maria.
In there.
Somebody, most of them.
Maria, you're going to see 8 people turn around. Shit.
No, but it's also different when you talk about white culture versus like really ethnic culture, because my family's from Ireland, and my grandmother came over here as a 14-year-old, started her own business. Actually, she's done really well. But there's still that strong Irish draw that I grew up doing Irish dancing. And river dance became really popular in the mid-'90s. I don't know if you guys remember that. I was doing that in the 80s. I had a kilt on, and I was in shame. I was like, oh, man, people doing Irish dancing have no swag. And then Michael Flatley comes
we're
along,
recording
no
this,
shirt
right?
on. And, yeah.
Right?
No, but I grew up, and I was very ashamed. I'd have the kilt on, and we were very into the Irish culture. And so I would say with my wife in particular, my family is probably more into the Irish culture than her family at large is with the traditional Filipino culture. Oh. Now, my wife's grandmother, rest in peace, she passed away about a year and a half ago, was almost 100 years old, and she really held the whole family together. Lola Rose, rest in peace. Beautiful person inside and out. And the whole family was just based on her. She was the rock. A really interesting woman that her husband was in the service, even though they were in the Philippines. She said, I'm not going to have any children until you're out of the service. So she's a 40-year-old woman with no kids. Had 8 kids between 40 and 46, a couple sets of twins in there. And then the gentleman, my wife's grandfather, passed away when the youngest was, I think, 4. So she was a single woman who came to this country, with all these kids, just making it work, making jobs happen. And people talk about the American dream. That's the American dream, is to get over that type of struggle and be not just a minority in this country, but have so many cards stacked against you. I mean, her husband was American military, so she had some benefits of the GI Bill and some things in her favor. But she had all of those kids that she had to take care of in San Francisco, sending most of them to Catholic school, and she made it work. So when I look at the kind of ethnic breakdown of the big family, it all goes back to her. To me, the ethnic success of minorities in America is just, it's all Lola Rose to me. It's that her being able to make so much of something out of nothing and raise that family. And I'm just doing this to show the in-laws. Next time I say something really offensive at a family party, Just download or stream this shit.
So do you feel like you lose your identity, or your kids gain an identity, or any of that by being?
Well, my kids,
from both sides?
I mentioned the question about skin color because my kids really are passing. They don't look ethnic unless their hair is a certain way, or if they're wearing a barong, people will be like, "Oh, that's a Filipino shirt. Where'd you get that?" And they'll be like, "Oh, from my grandparents, my uncle." Like that's their traditional answer. So my kids, who are also blonde when they were very young, their hair kind of grew out. But yeah, my youngest in particular, he has dark hair, but my other son was blonde, and so my wife would push him around the stroller and be like, "Oh, you're the nanny, you're the babysitter." Just they didn't even associate that my wife could be his mother because my wife was very ethnic.
Oh, okay.
And my son was a blonde baby.
Right.
So there was always that going on. That my wife, I think, she invested more time into realizing her own ethnic identity when she saw that people would see her out with her children and not think, "Oh, those are her kids."
Right.
Because they are two very pale kids. And she's obviously, and my wife's ethnically ambiguous too. People look at her. I remember when I met her, I'm like, I don't know what she is, but she's hot. Like, I just, whatever that is, I want some of that. And I lucked into it. But at the end of the day, I completely lost my train of thought. At the end of the day, the sun goes down. At the end of the day, the day is over. At the end of the day, you have a conclusion. But no, when it comes to just one side lose their ethnic identity when they're cohabitating or making a family with the other, I think that's all a case-by-case basis. I think it's however much time you and your partner put into it is what you're going to get out of it. So I think it's a blanket statement to say everybody loses part of their ethnic identity when you're in a biracial relationship. If you had a strong ethnic identity beforehand, you're probably still going to have a strong one afterwards. And the heart is not finite. There's an infinite amount of love and understanding and acceptance that can go on with not just your culture, but somebody that you love's culture. So I don't think that I've lost anything. I hope my wife hasn't lost anything. If there has been any change, it's been a gain.
Oh,
that's the most long-winded way.
Over his house,
right?
Shit. So in your house, how do you feel? Do you feel like they've gained, you've gained, lost? Do you feel like, and is it different per child too?
Yeah, and so I have multiple kids from multiple moms, and so the most, I'll say my two younger sons, the 15-year-old, the 12-year-old I was referring to, their mom's from Israel. She's Jewish.
Oh,
all right.
That's Jewish, like from the motherland Jewish right there.
Right.
A real chosen person.
And in that context, and she doesn't actively practice religion, though, she does all the holidays. So every holiday that's going on. So they got that piece, and based upon that culture, the mom carries the religion. So they're automatically Jewish just because their mom's Jewish, boom, done. And, so they learned about the holidays and so on and so forth and all that stuff. And, there's representation of, the really sad things like the Holocaust. And however, on the black side, to your question, I have to make sure that they get that identity. It's a responsibility on me, on making sure that, so as an example, my 15-year-old, we didn't do it the last year and the year before. Actually, we were joking about that. But we went to like historically black colleges to go to homecoming. So we went to Howard homecoming. We went to South Carolina State homecoming. When he was 10 years old, I took him back to South Carolina State homecoming to watch the homecoming. We went to a step show. So I took him to Orangeburg, South Carolina, in the middle of a step show. And, he lived out here in Roseville, California his whole life.
Now, a step show is when one show gets divorced and marries another show. Like, what is a step show? I'm asking on behalf of white people.
Right.
Step show is like you visit one show on weekends and then the other show you live with full time.
Yeah, we're going to give white people the job of Google. All right, so Google step show.
Yeah, step up.
Yeah.
And watch.
And we went there, and he was sitting there, and I had, my brother was there, my aunt and uncle were there. So it was 5 of us there and my son. And we're sitting there, and we're like an hour in, starts late like we do, and some stepping's going on, and then they take an intermission. And he leans forward. I'm 2 seats over. My brother's here between me and him, and my aunt and uncle on the other side. He said, "Daddy." I said, "Yeah, what's up?" He said, "Are white people allowed in here?" Like,
No, we're
and I'm like,
Not while we're here.
I'm like, "Yeah, why?" He says, "I haven't seen a single one." I'm like, "And how do you feel about that?" He was like, "I'm having a great time."
Yeah,
And I'm like,
comfortable.
"That's all that
Yeah.
matters." That's all that matters. And because, he grew up with schools that didn't include him. So he's 100% used to being in all white environments. That's all that they were exposed to in this suburban area that I live in. And so now he was dealing, he's used to being around my family, but that's family. And it's sort of the, 3, 4, 5 cousins,
Yeah.
uncles, aunts, et cetera, whatever at a time. But now he was in a big gym, a couple thousand people, and he couldn't find a white person. And he was like, "This is foreign to me."
Did he feel more comfortable?
He felt completely comfortable with it. So then the next year we went to the Howard homecoming, which Howard's the Mecca, man. It's and so we're there, and the step show's going on, the music and everything else. And, like I have pictures of him meeting Debbie Allen at the football game. She was sitting right in front of us. I don't know if you know who Debbie Allen is. And like,
Debbie Allen, she was on the Cosby Show.
that's her sister.
Okay.
The TV show Fame. She's an amazing dancer, so on and so forth.
Oh no, she's a choreographer, not just dancer, right? She did
Yeah,
Broadway
she did
stuff.
choreography.
Yeah, she's a Broadway
Grey's,
star too.
Grey's,
Yeah.
Grey's Anatomy. She's one of the executive producers for that, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I'm vaguely familiar.
Yeah. So anyway, so he met her. So for black folk, we like Debbie Allen, Rashida Allen. Like, y'all got to get with it. But he got to be in those experiences, and so it was important for me to make sure that I can't just have him be in this suburban environment and just take in white view of everything, where he sees everything else but himself reflected. And so I had to have him immersed in us. And through that, he's now more and more like, he loves his culture. So he's active with the NAACP work that goes on. And, he sees what I'm doing. He's active with the Black Student Union at the high school. He's, engaging and having a voice around what it means to be black. And how do I feel in this environment? Whereas he had his first teacher that looked like him, or he saw his first black teacher when he got to 9th grade. And so he's recognizing where he's not there, but he's also saying to himself, how does that feel? And is it okay? And why is that? And so from an identity point of view, it's important to me to make sure that I get that for him, and for all of my children. But that's just sort of an example of some of the stuff that happened with him. This once we get past COVID, we're going back to some more homecomings. We're going back to, I'm probably going to be throwing parties for, just black folk come and play bid, whist, and bones, and just to hang out, because we don't get to see each other. Especially, this is a California dynamic for me. It's interesting when people talk about, in California, they say the black school. Mm-hmm. And when they say the black school, they mean a school with about 20% black folk.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that ain't black. Because my high school was 100% black. And I'm like, a black school has at least 60% black people. And so my comfort with culture and identity means that my idea of being discriminated against as a kid at school was colorism and socioeconomic issues. So I was embarrassed as a kid growing up because I got free lunch, 100% free lunch. The people who got reduced and didn't have to pay for lunch at all, those were the rich people to me. Mm-hmm. And that was discrimination in my school.
And we was rich then.
Right. Yeah. And so, and then it was colorism. So the light-skinned folk were the pretty folk, and the darker you were, the less privilege you got. And so, that was the dynamic that we dealt with within my context of school, but we all were taught that we were beautiful as black folk, no matter what. We were all taught that we were beautiful, no matter rich, poor, no matter light, dark, you're beautiful. And so when I left the South, as much as people in California, they'll see something that happens in the South, they're like, oh, it's the South, what do you expect? I'm like, I've seen more racism in California than I ever saw in Columbia, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. Ever, not even close. I felt discriminated against in California 10 times more than I have in Columbia, South Carolina. And part of that is because there's intentional segregation there, and where people stand, but your identity is built into you. You are forced to know who you are, what your value is and what you bring to community. And that's not based on America's view of you. That's based upon community and love. That's based upon you standing up and speaking up and doing something on behalf of somebody else. You can be criminal by America's standard, but loving on your people, and community has 100% respect for you. And as a black person, you understand that and you respect that and you take that in, because we've learned all too often that America doesn't prioritize us, doesn't look at us as the same as anyone else. And so when we, identify that identity, so as a black man, when even if I've had interracial relationships and my kids come out, biracial, I'm like, in America, you're black first. It's the one drop rule that America still applies to you no matter what. And you're going to know your blackness, and you're going to understand your blackness, and you're going to love black people, and black people are going to love you. And here's how you give back to actually make a difference in that. And so that's been my responsibility. And I will say that it does bring about a huge challenge for black folk in that seeing our culture watered down. Every once in a while you get the complaint of black women don't like black men with other outside the race.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely empathize with that and respect that, because when you are watching a individual who you spent 100% of your life defending, if not directly, but indirectly, and you have put forth 400 years of effort on behalf of that person and with that person, and you watch American society take 25% of that group of people and incarcerate them. And then those who aren't incarcerated are typically pushed down to be considered dumb, less than, uneducated, not worthy, and you're still loving on them. And then someone outside the group who has never been a part of the active love and involvement in those individuals comes along and says, you look good for now, I want to be a part of you. And that person then shuns, theoretically, you as a black woman for one of those other pieces. How can you not be hurt by that? And so I completely am 100% with sisters on that. I understand that, and so I take my shots for that.
I hear Candace Owens is free. No.
So you're saying I've got a chance.
right. But maintaining that identity is something that's important. And so that whole salad bowl and,
the melting pot
thing,
yeah.
I'm not here to assimilate, but at the same time, for me to make a lot of the change that I've made, I've also had to learn, from a young age. A teacher taught me this, like, when in Rome, you do as Rome do. When in Rome, you do as Romans do.
Yeah.
Wrestle.
And essentially that's all about code switching for us. It's like, okay, so when we're in these white people environments, because I went to an all black high school, I had 70% black teachers. Like,
I was going to ask that question, the percentage of teachers, because I lived in Antioch, California for middle school, which is a pretty urban area. I would say we had 65% blacks at our middle school, and our principal was black, and our vice principal was black, and 90% of the teachers were white or Asian. So there was this strong push for racial awareness and equality from the top.
Right.
But you had 40 or 50 teachers. It was a pretty big school who all didn't know how the hell to handle it.
Exactly. Yeah, and so our teachers grew up. I mean, like, and if you look around, it's sort of everything that we did was culturally based. It was understood. Like, one of my 10th grade teacher challenged me about acting dumb, and challenged me because she was like, I know your family. I know your family struggles. I remember when your mom had to leave school because she was pregnant. I remember when your mom dropped out. I remember when, your uncle went to jail. I remember this, and that, and the other. And she's having this talk to me as a 10-year-old kid in high school. And like, so you can keep acting dumb all you want when you have the ability to do better, but that ain't going to get you out of the projects or the work or the environment that you're in. You need to go and be something, to do something, to come back and do well. And back then it was like, man, shut up, lady.
Was she trying to start a fight?
And, right,
I remember when your mom dropped
right.
out. Like, I remember when your uncle got locked
exactly.
up.
It was hurtful. But the piece to that is culturally, she had permission already. But no white teacher would ever try that conversation with me.
Oh, they would not step over that line.
They wouldn't even come close to that. But she knew, there's a cultural connection there that she was like, yeah, bro, I'm calling you on your shit today.
Yeah.
And so from a cultural identity point of view, it's my responsibility to make sure that my kids get that. It's my responsibility to make sure that other black kids get that. And when people cross that line, it's my responsibility to call them out. And so, I've generated this skill of being able to know what happens in Rome. And so I play in Rome. I play in Rome very well. But I'm 100% committed to the black community.
And I asked you while you were talking, if your son felt comfortable with it being an all black crowd, And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, to answer the question myself, I was like, I guess I am a coconut, man. Like and I tell people I think it's because I don't speak Spanish. It's because I don't have that. So it's hard for me to try to teach my kids. Like, they know what tortillas taste like and stuff like that. But when it comes to, like, I don't think I've gone to a quinceañera in forever. So my kids probably will never go to one where, I look at stuff. I've taken my kids. My hometown is El Paso, Texas, which is should just be Mexico, right?
Right.
So
Right. It was.
Right. Yeah, right.
yeah. So, I took them there a couple of years ago, and it's a whole different mindset down there.
Yeah.
And I know that they're experiencing it through my whitewashed eyes.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas if I was pro-Latino, I guess, or something, they would be like, man, like, and they would have that different experience. So to hear, that's why I asked.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything else, but
No,
but to put it out there, like, shit. Well,
it makes me wonder too. So you talked about being in a stadium full of just all black people. Are you comfortable if you're in a place that's just all Latinos, or do you? Because I'm personally uncomfortable if I'm in an area that's all white people. It might just be from going on stage.
No, I
And
think
all white people are harder to make laugh. Like, oh, they're just too prissy, or that they're worried about misconceptions of what you may say or what it's okay to laugh at. That I'm scared if it's all white people. I really like to see an older kind of mixed crowd. That's the ideal crowd in my mind. People who've lived a little bit,
Right.
who aren't young and worried about every word coming out of your mouth all the time.
Right.
So I want to say, if you're comfortable, because I'm not comfortable.
I
with that,
think
but
if it's more of these California Mexicans, I'm okay.
Okay.
And I want to say up north, right? Because I think there is a divide there too. I think SoCal Mexicans are kind of like being in El Paso, where nothing against it. I'm just saying it just makes me feel like, because I don't speak Spanish. So where I don't put myself in those situations a lot. I don't like Mexican music, so I don't fucking go hang out with that shit. I'd rather listen to rap or R&B. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'd rather go hang out at Yoshi's in Oakland than I would in Fruitvale anywhere. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that's to answer your question. No, I probably don't feel as comfortable, and I didn't realize it till having this conversation that I haven't put that on my kids neither. So I guess I'm the one that needs to step up his goddamn game.
Yeah,
all right.
And that's a great opportunity, though. It's sort of and you expose them and you let them make the choice. And we make jokes in our house, like with one of my sons is like, yo, like, yeah, there's too many black people there. He's not quite comfortable yet. Anyway, so we'll make a joke but for me, it's important to call it out. Like, put the ugly junk out. Let's talk about it. We're family for a reason. It's like, yo, have the conversation on, like, why aren't we going to the quinceanera? Like, yo, let's go check it out. Let's go be uncomfortable. Like, because that's what we need white people to do. We need white people to be uncomfortable.
Oh, trust us, we're uncomfortable most of the time.
By choice. And that's the piece, is white people get uncomfortable and they immediately move to a place of comfort because they can.
Mm-hmm. That's why we're tidy whities, because we like to be uncomfortable. We like that restraint.
So, if they're in the middle of a black community anywhere or too many black people around, they make a left turn and a right up here and so on and so forth. They're like, we feel better. I don't have that option. My sons are never going to have that option unless we move back south to just say, yo, we want to go where we're going to be all around black folk. Like, that's not available to us. And so I push folk to, like, go get uncomfortable, bro. Like, go do that quinceanera. Go sit there in the living room where they talking shit about you because you ain't say a word of Spanish yet. And you're like, you figure out how to have a good time to be happy within your uncomfortable zone. So, yeah.
I guess
fuck that.
we're gonna end it on that. We're gonna end it on that.
We're sitting here on couches. We don't like to be comfortable. Let me put my feet up.
Right.
Just be uncomfortable. Don't let me fluff this real quick.
I
Yeah,
want
just
to
be
thank
uncomfortable.
both of you guys for joining me on this episode. Charlie Spank.
My pleasure.
I'll have all you guys' shit up on the YouTube channel too. And LaMills for being here. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this episode.
Boy Charlie Murphy, my main man Rick James. That's the one you think, the comedian Rick James. Get up.
I can't hear my neighbor crying, I can't breathe.
Please hit the subscribe button down low so you can see all new clips, all new episodes coming to you.